Emma Reynolds stared at the letter in her hands, the formal letterhead of Anderson Debt Collection mocking her with its crisp, professional font. The amount listed at the bottom of the page made her stomach churn. $350,000. Her father's gambling. Ted had finally caught up with them, and this time there would be no escaping it. "Mommy, can we have pancakes?" 6-year-old Sophie peeked around the kitchen doorway, her identical twin Lily standing just behind her, both with their mother's honey-blonde hair and wide blue eyes. Emma quickly folded the letter and tucked it into her pocket, forcing a smile. "Of course, sweethearts, go wash up while I get started." Their small apartment in Phoenix wasn't much, but Emma had managed to create a stable home for her daughters, despite her father's constant presence in their lives. Richard Reynolds had been a gambling addict for as long as Emma could remember. Her childhood memories were a blur of moving from apartment to apartment, hiding from debt collectors, and watching her father promise to change, only to disappear for days at a time and return with empty pockets and hollow apologies. As she mixed pancake batter, Emma's thoughts drifted back to the letter. $350,000. The collectors had made it clear they weren't interested in payment plans or negotiations. They wanted the money in full, and they wanted it soon. If she couldn't provide it, they would take her father's collateral, which, horrifyingly, included the deed to this apartment that he had somehow managed to put in his name despite Emma paying the mortgage. "Ladies, breakfast is served," Emma called, placing colorful plastic plates in front of her daughter's spots at the small kitchen table. The twins scampered in, giggling and pushing each other playfully. "Mommy, can we go to the park today?" Lily asked, maple syrup already smeared across her cheek. "After school, sweetheart. But first, Grandpa is going to pick you up for school today because Mommy has to go to work early." The mention of their grandfather darkened Sophie's expression. "I don't want Grandpa to take us. He always smells funny." Emma sighed, knowing the funny smell was cheap bourbon. "It's just for today, I promise. Now hurry up, he'll be here soon." After the girls were dressed in their school uniforms, Emma heard the telltale knock at the door. Richard Reynolds stood there looking more disheveled than usual. His once handsome face was lined with years of stress and bad decisions, his clothes rumpled as if he'd slept in them. "Morning, Em," he said, his voice gruff. "Got the little ones ready?" "Dad, we need to talk about this letter," Emma said quietly, making sure the twins were still in their bedroom. $350,000? How could you possibly— "Not now," Richard cut her off, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "Look, I know it's bad, but I have a plan. You just need to give me a little time." "We don't have time," Emma hissed. "They're giving us 2 weeks. 2 weeks, Dad. Where am I supposed to get that kind of money?" Richard ran a hand through his thinning hair. "I said I have a plan. Trust me, Emma. Have I ever let you down?" The question was so absurd that Emma nearly laughed. "Only my entire life," she whispered, feeling the weight of decades of disappointment. "Girls, Grandpa's here," she called, instead of continuing the argument. The twins appeared, backpacks in hand, their expressions wary. "Be good at school," Emma said, kneeling to hug them both tightly. "I love you more than anything in the world." "Love you too, Mommy," they chorused before reluctantly taking their grandfather's hands. As they left, Emma leaned against the closed door, her mind racing. Her job as a paralegal at Phoenix Law Associates paid decently, but nowhere near enough to cover a debt of this magnitude. She had a small savings account, built painstakingly over years of careful budgeting, but it contained less than $10,000, a drop in the bucket compared to what they needed. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. "Meet me at Westside Diner at 5, I have solution." Emma closed her eyes, dreading whatever solution Richard had cooked up. His solutions had a way of creating bigger problems, but she had no choice. For her daughters, she would do anything. The day at the law firm passed in a blur. Emma moved through her tasks mechanically, filing briefs and scheduling appointments, while her mind remained fixed on the impossible sum hanging over her head. By the time she clocked out, her nerves were frayed to breaking point. The Westside Diner was a grimy establishment on the outskirts of town, the kind of place that served breakfast all day and catered to people who didn't ask questions. Emma found her father in a back booth, nursing a cup of coffee that she suspected was spiked with something stronger. "You're late," Richard said, as she slid into the seat across from him. "I had to pick up the girls from school since you texted saying you couldn't do it," Emma replied curtly. "They're with Mrs. Patel next door, so what's this great solution you've come up with?" Richard glanced around furtively before sliding a glossy brochure across the table. Emma looked down at it, confused. "The Diamond Auction House, Las Vegas," she read aloud. "What is this, Dad? You're not suggesting we sell our furniture, are you? Because I don't think my IKEA couch is going to fetch $350,000. "Not furniture," Richard said, lowering his voice. "It's an exclusive auction for companions." Emma stared at him, uncomprehending at first. Then understanding dawned, and with it, horror. "You're not serious," she breathed. "You want me to sell myself to strange men?" "It's not like that," Richard said quickly, though his inability to meet her eyes told Emma otherwise. "These are wealthy businessmen looking for arrangements, short-term contracts. You'd be safe, treated well. And the money? Emma, you could make enough to pay off the debt with one contract, maybe even have some left over." Emma's hand trembled as she pushed the brochure back toward him. "You've lost your mind. I'm not doing this. There has to be another way." "There isn't," Richard insisted, desperation lacing his voice. "I've tried everything. These people, and they're not going to wait. If we don't pay, they'll take everything. The apartment, your savings, even custody of the girls." "What?" Emma's head snapped up. "What do you mean, custody of the girls?" Richard looked away. "I may have signed some papers when I was in deep. They know about Sophie and Lily, Emma. They know they're what you care about most." Cold fear washed over her. "What have you done?" she whispered. "I can fix this," Richard pleaded, "but you have to help me. One auction, one contract, 6 months tops. The girls would stay with me, and when you come back, everything would be paid off. We could start fresh." Emma felt sick. The thought of leaving her daughters, of submitting herself to this degradation, was unthinkable. But the alternative, losing her children, was worse. "I need to think," she said finally, rising from the booth on unsteady legs. "The auction is in 2 days," Richard called after her as she walked away. "In Vegas. I've already submitted your application. All you have to do is show up." Emma didn't respond. Outside in the parking lot, she leaned against her car, gulping in the hot Arizona air. Tears stung her eyes as the full weight of her situation crashed down upon her. For her entire life, she had been cleaning up her father's messes, sacrificing her own dreams and desires to keep their heads above water. Now he was asking for the ultimate sacrifice. As she drove to pick up her daughters, Emma's mind whirled with possibilities, searching desperately for another way out. But each avenue she considered led to the same dead end. Without that money, she would lose everything she had worked for, most importantly, her daughters. That night, after tucking the twins into bed, Emma sat at her small kitchen table with her laptop open, the brochure beside it. With trembling fingers, she typed the Diamond Auction House into the search bar. The website that appeared was sleek and discreet, advertising exclusive arrangements for discerning gentlemen and elegant companions for short-term contracts. A chat window popped up. "Your application has been pre-approved, Ms. Reynolds. We look forward to seeing you in Las Vegas." Emma closed the laptop with a snap, her decision made. For her daughters, she would walk through fire. For them, she would sacrifice her dignity, her freedom, everything. She only hoped that someday they would understand why she had to leave them, even if only temporarily. Tomorrow, she would book a flight to Las Vegas. Tomorrow, she would begin the hardest journey of her life. The Las Vegas Strip blazed with neon lights against the darkening desert sky as Emma's taxi pulled up to the private entrance of the Bellagio. Unlike the tourists flooding through the main doors, she was directed to a discreet side entrance, where a suited man checked her name against a tablet. "Ms. Reynolds, welcome," he said, his voice devoid of warmth. "Please follow me." Emma clutched her small overnight bag, her heart hammering against her ribs. She wore a simple black dress that she'd splurged on years ago for job interviews, the nicest thing she owned. The auction representatives had sent a detailed email about appearance expectations, but she had neither the means nor the inclination to transform herself into the polished commodity they clearly wanted her to be. The escort led her through a maze of corridors, away from the casino's cheerful chaos into increasingly quiet, plush surroundings. Finally, they reached a door marked simply Diamond Lounge. "Through here," the man instructed. "The preparation team is waiting for you." Inside, Emma found herself in what looked like a high-end spa or dressing room. 3 women greeted her with professional smiles. "Emma Reynolds, I'm Vanessa, the preparation coordinator," said a tall, elegant woman with a sleek bob. "We have approximately 3 hours before the evening's event begins. We'll need to get started right away." Before Emma could respond, she was whisked away to a dressing area where her measurements were taken. Vanessa looked over a tablet, efficiently tapping notes. "We've selected 3 possible gowns for you based on your photos, but we'll need to finalize the choice," she explained. "Hair and makeup will take approximately 90 minutes. The auction director will brief you on protocol during that time." "Wait," Emma said, finding her voice at last. "I need to know exactly what I'm getting into here. The terms, the expectations." Vanessa's expression softened slightly. "First timer, I see. All contracts are negotiated after selection, but standard terms are 6 months of companionship. Your patron will provide housing, clothing, and a stipend. Some require travel, others want a local companion. Physical expectations vary, but all are bound by strict consent protocols." "And the money?" Emma asked, hating how desperate she sounded. "Minimum bids start at $50,000 for the contract period. Given your profile, I would estimate you could command $200,000 to $350,000, depending on the clientele tonight. Premium contracts can go higher." Emma's breath caught. It could be enough. It had to be enough. "Let's proceed," she said quietly. The next 3 hours passed in a blur of activity. Emma was transformed by expert hands, her hair styled into elegant waves, her makeup applied with precision to enhance her natural beauty while creating a polished, sophisticated appearance. She barely recognized herself in the mirror. The gown they selected was a deep emerald that brought out the blue in her eyes, cut to flatter her figure, while maintaining an air of mystery. The seamstress made quick alterations to ensure a perfect fit. Throughout the preparation, a stern woman named Ms. Winters briefed her on the auction protocols. "You will be announced by number, not name. You will walk the runway, pause at 3 designated points for exactly 15 seconds each. No speaking unless directly addressed by the auctioneer. No eye contact with individual bidders. You represent our establishment until the contract is signed, at which point you become your patron's companion." "And after the contract ends?" Emma asked. Ms. Winters' expression remained impassive. "That is between you and your patron. Some contracts are renewed, others end as agreed. Now you'll be number 17 tonight. Remember, confidence is your greatest asset on that stage." By the time Emma was led to the waiting area behind the auction stage, her nerves had transformed into a strange, detached calm. She thought of her daughters, their small faces and trusting eyes. For them, she would get through this night. For them, she would endure whatever came next. The waiting area contained about 20 women, all exquisitely dressed and groomed. Some chatted quietly in corners, clearly veterans of this process. Others, like Emma, sat alone, lost in thought or visibly nervous. A television monitor showed the auction stage, a sleek runway extending into a darkened room where shadowy figures sat at tables. "Number 15, Jasmine," called an attendant, and a stunning woman in a red gown stepped forward. Emma watched the monitor as Jasmine glided onto the stage, her movements practiced and graceful. The auctioneer, a distinguished older man, announced her attributes as if she were a fine painting or sculpture. "Bidding starts at $75,000, he declared, and numbers flashed rapidly on a digital board. Within minutes, Jasmine was sold for $180,000 to bidder number 43. "Number 16, Veronica." Another woman departed, leaving Emma next in line. Her mouth went dry. On the monitor, She watched as a brunette in a silver dress commanded the stage, ultimately fetching $220,000. Number 17, Emma. Taking a deep breath, Emma followed the attendant to the stage entrance. The lights were blinding as she stepped onto the runway, momentarily disorienting her. She forced herself to move forward, remembering the coaching about posture and pace. Number 17 is new to our establishment, the auctioneer announced, his voice smooth and cultured. 32 years old, educated, with natural grace and beauty. A rare fine gentleman, innocent to our world but willing to learn. Bidding starts at $50,000. Emma felt her cheeks burn at being described like merchandise, but she maintained her composure, pausing at the first designated spot. From the corner of her eye, she could see the bidding board flashing rapidly. 60,000, 75,000, 100,000. By the time she reached the second spot, the bidding had slowed somewhat. 150,000, 180,000, 200,000. At the third and final position, there seemed to be only two bidders remaining. 250,000, 275,000, 300,000. 300,000 from bidder 22, the auctioneer announced. Do I hear 325? Last. Call it 300,000. 500,000, came a new voice from the back of the room, deep and accented. A murmur rippled through the audience. Emma almost broke protocol to look for the source of the voice, but caught herself in time. 500,000 from bidder 36, the auctioneer confirmed, unable to keep a note of surprise from his voice. Going once, going twice. Sold to bidder 36 for $500,000. Emma's legs nearly gave out beneath her. 500,000. It was more than enough to pay her father's debt and secure her daughter's future. Relief washed over her, followed immediately by a wave of dread. Who had paid such an astronomical sum for her, and what would they expect in return? She was escorted off the stage to a small, elegantly appointed room where she was told to wait for her patron. Ms. Winters appeared briefly to congratulate her on the exceptional bid amount and to remind her that the contract would be finalized before she left with her new companion. Left alone, Emma paced the room anxiously. The door opened and she turned, bracing herself for her first glimpse of the man who had purchased 6 months of her life. He was not what she expected. Tall and impeccably dressed in a custom suit, with olive skin and striking dark eyes, he carried himself with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to power. He appeared to be in his early 40s, with subtle touches of silver at his temples that only enhanced his commanding presence. "Ms. Reynolds," he said, his voice carrying the same accent she had heard during the bidding. Middle Eastern, but softened by an American education. "I am Zain Nassar. It appears we have business to discuss." Emma straightened her shoulders, determined to maintain what dignity she could. "Mr. Nassar, I understand congratulations are in order for your purchase." A flicker of something, amusement, irritation, crossed his features. "I prefer to think of it as an arrangement, Ms. Reynolds, one that I hope will prove mutually beneficial." He gestured to the seating area. "Shall we discuss terms? I understand this is your first time participating in such an event. I can assure you that despite the unconventional beginning, I expect our arrangement to be based on clear understanding and respect." As Emma took a seat across from him, she felt a curious mixture of fear and relief. At least he seemed civilized, articulate. The enormity of what she had committed to suddenly struck her anew. "Mr. Nassar, I should be honest with you. I'm here for one reason only, to secure enough money to solve a family crisis. I have twin daughters, 6 years old. They're everything to me." Zane's expression remained unreadable. "I see. And you're concerned about how this arrangement will affect them." "They're staying with my father while I'm away," Emma said, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. "The contract is for 6 months, correct? I need to know exactly what you expect from me during that time." "Direct and practical," Zane observed. "I appreciate that." He leaned forward slightly. "What I expect, Ms. Reynolds, is companionship. You will reside in my home in Phoenix." "Phoenix?" Emma interrupted, surprised. Yes, I maintain several residences, but my primary home is in Phoenix. You'll accompany me to business functions, social events, and occasional travel. As for more intimate expectations, those will develop naturally or not at all. I don't require anything you're unwilling to give. Emma studied him skeptically. With all due respect, Mr. Nassar, men don't pay $500,000 for platonic companionship. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Perhaps not, but neither do they pay such sums simply for physical gratification, which can be obtained far more cheaply. What I seek is more complex, Ms. Reynolds. Let us say I have my reasons, which will become clear in time. Before Emma could question him further, the door opened and a representative entered with contract documents. The next hour was spent reviewing. Terms that were surprisingly fair. The full sum transferred immediately to an account of Emma's choosing, clear expectations regarding public appearances, and explicit language about consent and boundaries. By the time Emma signed the final page, the reality of her situation had fully descended. For the next 6 months, she belonged to this enigmatic man. She would live in his home, appear on his arm, and pretend to be… what? His companion? His mistress? The car is waiting, Zane said, as the representative collected the signed documents. Are you ready to depart, Ms. Reynolds? Emma thought of her daughters, who believed she had taken a 6-month contract job that would solve their financial problems. She thought of her father, who had put her in this impossible position, and she thought of the $500,000 now securing her family's future. Yes, Mr. Nassar, she replied, gathering her composure. I'm ready. As they left the auction house through a private exit, Emma couldn't help but wonder what she had gotten herself into. The desert night embraced them as they approached a waiting limousine, the neon lights of Las Vegas reflecting off its polished surface like false promises. She was stepping into the unknown with a stranger who had bought her time, her presence, and potentially more. Yet somehow, as Zain Nassar held the car door open for her with unexpected courtesy, Emma felt the strangest sensation that this auction might not be the ending she had feared, but rather the beginning of something she could never have anticipated. The sleek private jet cut through clouds as Emma stared out the window. The vastness of the desert below, a fitting metaphor for the empty space that had opened in her chest since leaving her daughters. It had been 3 days since the auction, and she was still trying to process the radical shift in her circumstances. We'll be landing in Phoenix in approximately 20 minutes, Ms. Reynolds, the flight attendant informed her with a polite smile. Across the luxurious cabin, Zain Nassar worked on his laptop, his focus intense. He had been nothing but courteous since their departure from Las Vegas, but also distant. After their initial conversation, he had retreated into work, leaving Emma to navigate her new reality largely alone. She had used the flight to Phoenix to call her daughters, speaking to them over the satellite phone Zane had provided without question when she'd asked. Hearing their voices had been both comforting and heartbreaking. "When are you coming home, Mommy?" Lily had asked, her small voice making Emma's heart clench. "Not for a while, sweetheart. Remember, Mommy has an important job to do, but I'll call you every day, and before you know it, I'll be back." The lie tasted like ashes in her mouth, but she couldn't bear to tell them the truth. How could she explain that she had essentially sold herself to save them? That was a burden they should never have to carry. As the plane began its descent, Zane finally closed his laptop and turned his attention to her. "We'll be going directly to the estate. I've arranged for a complete wardrobe to be prepared for you, along with anything else you might need." "Thank you," Emma replied stiffly, still uncomfortable with the transactional nature of their relationship. "Mr. Nassar, Zain," he interrupted. "Under the circumstances, I think we can dispense with formalities." Emma nodded. "Zain, then. I appreciate the consideration regarding my daughters. Being able to speak with them means a great deal to me." Something softened in his expression. "Family is important, Miss Reynolds." "Emma, please." "Emma?" The key way he said her name with his slight accent sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. "I understand your situation is complex. I have no desire to add to your burdens unnecessarily. The plane touched down smoothly on a private airstrip outside Phoenix. Through the window, Emma could see a black SUV waiting on the tarmac. Within minutes, they were speeding through the outskirts of the city toward the foothills, where the landscape grew increasingly exclusive. Zane's estate, as he had modestly called it, turned out to be a stunning modern mansion perched on the east slopes of Camelback Mountain, its clean lines and expansive glass windows offering breathtaking views of the valley below. As they passed through the security gates, Emma took in the manicured grounds, the sparkling infinity pool, and the general aura of tasteful opulence. "This is where you live?" she couldn't help asking as the SUV pulled up to the main entrance. "One of my residences," Zane replied. "I spend approximately half the year here. The rest is divided between New York, London, and Riyadh." A staff member opened Emma's door, and she stepped out feeling distinctly out of place in her simple travel outfit. Zane led her into a soaring entryway of marble and glass, where a woman in her 50s waited to greet them. "Ms. Reynolds, this is Mrs. Chen, my household manager. She'll show you to your suite and help you get settled." "This way, please," Mrs. Chen said with efficient warmth. As they climbed the sweeping staircase, she added, "Mr. Nassar has instructed us to provide you with anything you require. Your suite includes a bedroom, sitting room, private bathroom, and a small office. The closet has been stocked according to the measurements provided by the auction house." Emma followed her down a corridor to a set of double doors, which opened onto a space larger than her entire apartment back home. The suite was decorated in soothing tones of blue and cream, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the mountain. "Dinner will be served at 7 in the main dining room, unless you prefer to dine privately tonight," Mrs. Chen continued. "Mr. Nassar thought you might appreciate some time to rest and acclimate." "Thank you," Emma said, overwhelmed by the luxury surrounding her. "That's very thoughtful." Left alone, Emma explored her new quarters. The walk-in closet was filled with designer clothing in her size: casual wear, formal gowns, swimming attire, even workout clothes. The bathroom featured a massive marble shower and a soaking tub big enough for two. The small office contained a state-of-the-art laptop and a phone. Moving to the windows, Emma gazed out at the stunning view, tears suddenly blurring her vision. Just days ago, she had been making pancakes in her tiny kitchen, worried about making rent. Now she stood in a mansion, wearing borrowed finery belonging to a man she barely knew. She pulled out her own phone and looked at the screensaver, a photo of Sophie and Lily at their last birthday, chocolate cake smeared on their grinning faces. She had done this for them, she reminded herself. Whatever came next, she would endure it for them. After a long shower, Emma selected the simplest outfit she could find in the closet, dark jeans and a silk blouse, and made her way downstairs for dinner. She found Zane on the terrace, gazing out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the valley below. "The view is incredible," she said, announcing her presence. He turned, his eyes taking in her appearance with an intensity that made her self-conscious. "Phoenix has its charms," he agreed. "Different from Las Vegas, more authentic, less artificial." A server appeared with 2 glasses of wine. Emma accepted one, taking a small sip of what was clearly an expensive vintage. "I imagine this is all quite disorienting for you," Zane said, gesturing for her to sit at the outdoor dining table, set for 2. "That's one word for it," Emma replied, deciding honesty was her best approach. 3 days ago I was a paralegal trying to make ends meet. Now I'm..." She trailed off, unsure how to define what she was now. "My companion," Zane supplied, his expression unreadable. "Though I understand the circumstances that brought you to the auction were not of your choosing." Emma tensed. "What do you know about my circumstances?" "Only what research could tell me. Your father's gambling problems are well documented in credit reports. Your own financial situation shows a pattern of stability, interrupted by periodic crises, likely when you've had to bail him out." "You investigated me?" Emma felt a flash of indignation. "Of course," Zane replied matter-of-factly. "I don't spend $500,000 without due diligence, just as I'm sure you've spent the past 3 days trying to learn what you can about me." It was true. Emma had discreetly searched for information about Zain Nassar during their journey. She'd discovered he was the CEO of Nassar Global Investments, with holdings in real estate, technology, and energy across 4 continents. His personal wealth was estimated at several billion. Articles described him as brilliant, private, and something of an enigma in business circles. "What wasn't clear from my research," Zain continued, "was why a woman like you, educated, capable, devoted to her children, would agree to such an arrangement. The debt must be substantial." $350,000, Emma admitted. "My father managed to get in deep with some very dangerous people. They threatened to take everything, including custody of my daughters." Zain's expression darkened. "That explains your willingness to participate in the auction. It does not, however, explain why you agreed to come with me specifically. The amount bid was well above what you needed." Emma met his gaze directly. "Beggars can't be choosers, Mr. Nassar, Zain. But if you're asking why I didn't try to renegotiate after the auction, it's because the extra money means security for my daughters. A college fund, a chance at a life without constant financial struggle." Their conversation paused as servers brought the first course, an elegant salad of local greens and citrus. When they were alone again, Zain spoke more softly. "I appreciate your candor, Emma. In return, I should be clear about my own motivations. I'm sure you're wondering why I bid such an amount." "The thought had crossed my mind," Emma admitted. Zain swirled his wine thoughtfully. 2 years ago, I was engaged to be married. Catherine was from a prominent Boston family, our union combining old money with new. Our families were pleased, the business advantages were significant, and for a time, I believed we might even find happiness together. Emma listened, sensing the story was heading toward pain. "A month before the wedding, I discovered Catherine had been involved with someone else the entire time. My driver, as it happens. The humiliation was considerable. In business, I've cultivated a reputation for being calculating, even ruthless when necessary. But in personal matters, I found myself unprepared for such betrayal." "I'm sorry," Emma said softly, genuine, sympathy overriding her wariness. "Since then, I've avoided entanglements. My work fills my time, but social obligations remain. Having a companion, one with no illusions about romance, solves several problems at once." Emma processed this information, still sensing there was more he wasn't telling her. "So I'm to be your shield against society's matchmakers and your ex-fiancé's gossip." A slight smile touched his lips. "Among other things, you'll find, Emma, that appearances matter greatly in my world. Having you by my side will create a certain impression that serves my purposes." "And what impression is that?" she asked, her appetite diminishing despite the exquisite food. "That I've moved on, that I'm not the wounded party in some society drama." His dark eyes held hers. "That I'm in control." The intensity of his gaze made her look away. "I see." "Do you?" he challenged softly. "I wonder, but perhaps understanding will come with time. For now, let's establish the practical aspects of our arrangement. You'll accompany me to business dinners, charity functions, and social events. When necessary, we'll travel together. You'll have access to the house, the grounds, the cars, within reason. Your privacy in your suite will be absolute." "And what do you expect from me, son, privately?" Emma forced herself to ask the question directly. Zain regarded her thoughtfully. "Nothing you don't freely offer. I didn't pay for unwilling physical intimacy, Emma. I paid for a convincing companion who understands discretion and boundaries." Relief washed through her, though she wondered if he was being entirely truthful. Men like Zain Nassar weren't known for their self-restraint. "One more thing," he added, his tone shifting to something more businesslike. "I occasionally host important clients here. During those times, I'll need you to be particularly convincing in your role. Can you manage that?" Emma straightened her shoulders. "I'm a quick study, Zain. I'll learn whatever I need to make this arrangement work, for both our sakes." The remainder of dinner passed in easier conversation. Zain proved to be knowledgeable about art, literature, and politics, engaging Emma in discussions that challenged her intellect in ways her recent life had rarely allowed. Despite the circumstances, she found herself enjoying his company, at least on an intellectual level. After dessert, he excused himself for an international call, leaving Emma to find her way back to her suite alone. As she prepared for bed in the luxurious bathroom, she caught her reflection in the mirror. The same face, but somehow already changed by circumstances. 6 months, she whispered to herself. Just get through 6 months. But as she slipped between the silk sheets of her new bed, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that 6 months with Zain Nassar might change her in ways she couldn't anticipate. The man was an enigma, courteous yet distant, seemingly transparent about his motivations yet clearly holding something back. And somewhere beneath her wariness and determination to endure this arrangement for her daughter's sake, Emma felt an unwelcome flicker of curiosity about the man who had paid such an extraordinary sum for her companionship. Sleep eluded her as she wondered what secrets Zain Nassar might be hiding behind those inscrutable dark eyes. 3 weeks into her new life at the Nassar estate, Emma had settled into a routine that was both surreal and surprisingly manageable. Each morning she woke early to video chat with Sophie and Lily before they left for school. She then spent her days exploring the grounds, swimming in the infinity pool, or reading in the extensive library. Occasionally she accompanied Zain to business dinners or social functions where she played her role as his companion, with growing confidence. For his part, Zain remained an enigma, polite but distant, revealing little of himself beyond the carefully constructed persona he presented to the world. They shared meals when his schedule allowed, engaging in stimulating conversation that left Emma both intellectually satisfied and emotionally confused. Despite the transactional nature of their relationship, she found herself drawn to his quick mind and dry humor. Tonight was different, however. Zain had informed her that morning that they would be attending a charity gala at the Phoenix Art Museum, an event where, he warned, they might encounter people from his past. Including Catherine, he had added, his expression giving nothing away. My former fiancée has returned to Phoenix temporarily. Her family has significant influence with the museum board. Now, as Emma sat at the vanity in her suite, applying the finishing touches to her makeup, she felt a knot of tension in her stomach. This would be their first major public appearance together, and the stakes suddenly felt much higher. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting Mrs. Chen with some last-minute wardrobe suggestion. Instead, Zain himself entered, already dressed in a perfectly tailored tuxedo that emphasized his broad shoulders and lean frame. Emma caught his reflection in the mirror and momentarily lost her train of thought. He was, objectively speaking, a strikingly handsome man. "I have something for you," he said, holding a flat velvet box. "For tonight." Emma turned to face him, aware of her own appearance in the midnight blue gown that had been delivered that morning, floor-length silk with a subtle shimmer, elegant without being ostentatious. "You didn't need to," she began. "It's part of the arrangement," Zain interrupted smoothly. "Appearances, remember?" He opened the box to reveal a diamond necklace, the stones catching the light in a dazzling display. It was tasteful despite its obvious value, a delicate design of graduated diamonds that would rest against her collarbone. "May I?" he asked, lifting the necklace. Emma nodded, turning back to the mirror and lifting her hair. Zain stepped behind her, his fingers brushing the nape of her neck as he fastened the clasp. Their eyes met in the mirror, a moment of connection that felt strangely intimate. "Perfect," he murmured, his hands lingering briefly on her shoulders. Emma touched the necklace gently. "It's beautiful. Thank you." "They're just diamonds, Emma," Zain said, his voice taking on an edge she hadn't heard before. "Don't confuse the trappings of this arrangement with something more." The reminder stung more than it should have. "I'm not confused about anything, Zain," she replied coolly. "I know exactly what this is." Something flickered in his eyes, regret perhaps, or annoyance at his own lapse in control. He stepped back, his mask of polite detachment sliding back into place. "The car will be ready in 10 minutes, he said before leaving the room. Emma exhaled slowly, her fingers still tracing the diamonds at her throat. He was right, of course. This wasn't a relationship, it was a business arrangement. The sooner they both remembered that, the better. The Phoenix Art Museum was transformed for the evening, its modern galleries softened by strategic lighting and floral arrangements. As Zane escorted her inside, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back, Emma felt the curious gazes of Phoenix's elite following them. "Smile," Zane murmured close to her ear. "We're making an entrance." And indeed they were. Heads turned as they made their way to the bar, whispers following in their wake. Emma maintained her composure, drawing on years of watching her father charm his way out of difficult situations. She might have grown up modestly, but she knew how to fake belonging. "Zain Nasser," came a female voice from behind them. What a lovely surprise. They turned to face a strikingly beautiful woman in her mid-30s, her ash-blonde hair styled in an elegant updo, diamonds similar to Emma's adorning her ears and wrist. The resemblance to the photos Emma had discovered online was unmistakable. Catherine Williams, Zane's former fiancée. "Catherine," Zane acknowledged with a slight nod. "Allow me to introduce Emma Reynolds, my companion." Catherine's eyes swept over Emma with clinical precision, assessing and dismissing her in seconds. "How nice. I didn't realize you were attending tonight, Zane. You usually avoid these stuffy events." "Emma has a particular interest in contemporary art," Zane replied smoothly, his arm slipping around Emma's waist. "And the cause is certainly worthwhile." Of course, Catherine's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Arts education is so important. Don't you agree, Ms. Reynolds?" "Absolutely," Emma answered, maintaining her poise. "I believe early exposure to art helps develop critical thinking skills that benefit children throughout their lives." Catherine looked momentarily surprised, as if she hadn't expected an articulate response. "Well, how refreshing to hear. You must tell me how you and Zane met. It's all been very sudden." Before Emma could fabricate an appropriate story, Zane intervened. "Sometimes, Catherine, one recognizes value immediately. Unlike some, I don't require years to determine what or who I want." The barb landed precisely as intended. Catherine's smile tightened. "How fortunate for you both." "Oh, I see the museum director waving to me. Duty calls. Enjoy your evening." As she walked away, Emma released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That was uncomfortable. "You handled it perfectly," Zane said, his hand still resting possessively on her waist. "Catherine expected to find me either alone or with an empty-headed model. You surprised her. Is that why you brought me? To surprise your ex?" Zane's expression darkened slightly. "Partly, but don't underestimate yourself, Emma. You're not just a prop in this scenario." Before she could ask what he meant, they were approached by an older couple, eager to discuss a potential investment with Zane. The evening proceeded in a blur of introductions and small talk, Emma playing her role while observing the dynamics around her. She noticed how Catherine kept Zane in her sightline throughout the night, how her smile faltered whenever he and Emma shared a laugh or a private moment. During dinner, they were seated at a table with 3 other couples, including a friendly software developer and his wife, who engaged Emma in genuine conversation. For brief moments, she almost forgot the artificial nature of her presence there. It was during dessert that the evening took an unexpected turn. Zane excused himself to speak with a business associate, leaving Emma chatting with the developer's wife about their shared love of mystery novels. She was so engaged in the conversation that she didn't notice Catherine approaching until the woman slid into Zane's empty chair. "Ms. Reynolds," Catherine said, her voice lowered to ensure privacy, despite the bustling room. "I feel I should warn you about Zane, for your own good." Emma raised an eyebrow. "That's very considerate of you, but I'm quite capable of forming my own judgments." Catherine leaned closer. "Did he tell you why our engagement ended? The real reason?" Despite herself, Emma felt a prickle of curiosity. "I don't believe that's any of my business. It became my business when he ruined my reputation in 3 states, Catherine hissed, her composed facade cracking slightly. Zain Nassar doesn't forgive, and he doesn't forget. When he feels betrayed, he destroys people. Ask him about Michael. Sometime, my driver, as Zain so dismissively called him. Ask what happened after Zain discovered us together. Emma maintained a neutral expression, though her heart rate had accelerated. Again, Ms. Williams, I don't see how this concerns me. It concerns you because you're clearly his latest chess piece, Catherine replied. Zain doesn't do anything without calculation. Whatever he's paying you, or whatever arrangement you have, understand that you're serving a purpose in his larger game. And when that purpose is fulfilled, you'll be discarded, just like everyone else. Before Emma could respond, Zain returned to the table. Catherine rose smoothly, her public smile back in place. Just getting acquainted with your lovely companion, Zain. She's quite resilient. After Catherine departed, Zain studied Emma's face. What did she say to you? Nothing of consequence, Emma replied, not ready to reveal the details of their conversation. Just trying to mark her territory, I think. Zain's jaw tightened. Catherine has always excelled at manipulation. Whatever she told you, take it with several grains of salt. The remainder of the evening passed without incident, though Emma found her thoughts returning to Catherine's warnings. On the drive home, she sat in silence, watching the city lights blur past and wondering about the man beside her. What game was he really playing, and what role had he cast her in? Back at the estate, Zain escorted her to the entrance of her suite. As they stood at her door, an unexpected tension filled the air between them. You were magnificent tonight, he said quietly. Every eye in the room was on you. Including Catherine's, Emma observed. I think your plan worked. She seemed affected by my presence. Zain's expression darkened. Catherine's feelings are no longer my concern. Aren't they? Emma challenged softly. She seems to be at least part of the reason I'm here. For a moment, Zain's carefully maintained control slipped, and Emma glimpsed something raw and wounded in his eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by his usual inscrutable gaze. Good night, Emma, he said, turning to leave. Zain, she called after him, surprising herself. He paused, looking back at her. What happened to Michael, Catherine's driver? A flicker of something, anger, regret, crossed his features. That's a story for another time, sleep well. Alone in her suite, Emma removed the diamond necklace and placed it carefully in its velvet box. She changed out of the gown into comfortable pajamas, her mind still processing the events of the evening. As she washed her face, removing the last traces of makeup, she heard her phone chime with an incoming text. It was from her father. Need to see you. Important. Tomorrow? Emma frowned at the message. In the weeks since she'd left, Richard had respected her request for minimal contact, limiting his communication to brief updates about the twins. This urgency was unusual and concerning. She texted back, "The girl's okay." His response came immediately. "Fine, but situation complicated. Need to discuss in person." Emma sighed, a knot of anxiety forming in her stomach. Despite everything, Richard was still her father, and he was caring for her daughters. She couldn't ignore him. "I'll try to come by tomorrow afternoon," she replied. Setting down her phone, Emma moved to the window, gazing out at the moonlit desert landscape. 3 weeks ago, she had entered this arrangement believing it would be a straightforward transaction, her companionship in exchange for financial security. Now she found herself entangled in Zain's complicated past, navigating emotional currents she hadn't anticipated. Catherine's warning echoed in her mind. Zain doesn't do anything without calculation. Was Emma truly just a pawn in some elaborate game of revenge? And why did that possibility bother her so much? As she slipped into bed, Emma confronted an uncomfortable truth. Despite her best intentions to remain emotionally detached, she was beginning to care what Zain Nassar thought of her. More troublingly, she was beginning to care about him, this complex, guarded man whose motivations remained as mysterious as the desert night beyond her window. Tomorrow, she would face her father, and whatever new complication he was bringing into her life. But tonight, her thoughts remained with Zayn and the brief moment of vulnerability she had glimpsed beneath his controlled exterior. There was more to him than the calculating businessman, more to his story than he had revealed. And despite all reason and self-preservation, Emma found herself wanting to discover what lay beneath the surface. The Desert Bloom Cafe sat on a quiet corner in downtown Phoenix, its faded awning and mismatched furniture giving it a charm that chain coffee shops couldn't replicate. Emma had suggested it for her meeting with her father, preferring neutral territory over having him come to the estate or visiting her old apartment. She arrived early, selecting a table in the back corner that offered privacy without isolation. When Richard Reynolds entered 10 minutes late, Emma immediately noticed how much he had aged in just a few weeks. His shoulders slumped, his complexion sallow, his once confident stride reduced to an anxious shuffle. "Emma," he said, dropping into the chair across from her, "you look different." She knew what he meant. The expensive clothes, the salon-styled hair, the subtle makeup that Mrs. Chen's recommended esthetician had taught her to apply, all transformations courtesy of Zayn's resources. "The girls?" she asked, bypassing small talk. "They're fine. At school now. Mrs. Patel's picking them up today." Richard fidgeted with a sugar packet. "You should see them soon. They miss you." "I miss them too," Emma said, the familiar ache of separation intensifying. "But that's not why you wanted to meet. What's going on, Dad?" Richard glanced around nervously before leaning forward. "The guys I owe money to, they're not satisfied." Emma's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about? The debt was paid. In full 3 weeks ago, I transferred the money myself." I know, Richard said quickly, "and they got it. But now they're saying there was interest, additional fees that weren't calculated." "How much?" Emma asked, her voice flat. "Another 100,000. Emma stared at him in disbelief. "That's absurd. The original agreement didn't mention any additional fees." "These aren't exactly people who follow contractual niceties, Emma," Richard hissed, his eyes darting around the cafe. "They want the money, or they'll take the apartment. And they know about your arrangement with Nassar. They think you can get more. So they're extorting me now." Emma fought to keep her voice down. "This is never going to end, is it? Every time I clean up one of your messes, you create another." Richard's face crumpled. "I'm sorry, Em. I never meant for things to get this bad. I thought I could fix it before it touched you and the girls." "You've been saying that my entire life," Emma replied, decades of disappointment hardening her voice. "I had to sell myself to clean up your mess, Dad. Do you understand that? 6 months of my life, away from my daughters, because you couldn't control your addiction." "I know," Richard's voice broke, "and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to you. But right now, we need to deal with this threat. These people won't hesitate to..." "To what?" Emma interrupted. "To take the apartment that's no longer in your name? I transferred ownership to a trust for the girls the day after I paid your debt. They can't touch it." Richard blinked in surprise. "You did what?" "I'm not completely naive, Dad. I used part of the money to hire a lawyer who specializes in asset protection. The apartment, the girls' college fund, everything is legally secured. These people have no leverage." For a moment, Richard looked genuinely impressed. Then his expression darkened again. "They'll find another way, Emma. People like this always do." Emma leaned back, studying her father. Something wasn't adding up. "What aren't you telling me? There's more to this than just additional fees, isn't there?" Richard's eyes shifted away, confirming her suspicion. "I might have done some work for them, to try to pay off the original debt. Nothing illegal," he added hastily. "Just some financial consulting, moving money around, but I saw things I shouldn't have. Names, accounts. If they think I might talk..." "Oh my God," Emma whispered, the full picture finally becoming clear. "This isn't about money at all. They're using me to control you." Before Richard could respond, Emma's phone vibrated with an incoming call. Zayn's name flashed on the screen. She hesitated, then answered. "Emma," Zayn's voice was tense. "Where are you?" At Desert Bloom Cafe, meeting my father. Why? Stay there. Don't leave. I'm sending security to you now. The urgency in his tone sent a chill down her spine. What's happening? She asked, her eyes meeting her father's across the table. Your father's business associates have been making inquiries about you and about me. My security team intercepted. So concerning communication, I'll explain when you're safely back at the estate. After ending the call, Emma fixed her father with a hard stare. What have you gotten me into? Richard's face had gone pale. Who was that, Nassar? How does he know about... He has resources you can't imagine. Emma cut him off. What have these people asked you to do, Dad? The truth now. Richard seemed to deflate before her eyes. They want information about Nassar, his business dealings, security systems, daily routines. They think because you're with him, you can provide that. And if I don't? They implied they might take the girls, Richard whispered, just until the information is provided, as insurance. Emma felt the world tilt beneath her. Rage, fear, and determination surged through her in equal measure. That's not going to happen, she said, her voice deadly calm. No one is touching my daughters. She stood abruptly. Zain is sending security here. They'll take you to get the girls from school, then bring all of you to the estate. It's the safest place right now. Emma, I can't just... This isn't a negotiation, Dad. For once in your life, do exactly as I say. She gathered her purse, her mind already racing ahead to what needed to be done. And on the way, you're going to tell Zain's security team everything you know about these people. Every name, every location, every detail. Outside the cafe, a black SUV pulled up to the curb. Two men in suits emerged, their professional demeanor belied by the alertness in their eyes. Emma recognized Zain's head of security, Marcus, a former military officer, whose quiet competence she had noted at various functions. Ms. Reynolds, Marcus greeted her with a nod. Mr. Nassar has asked us to escort you and your father back to the estate. Another team is already en route to your daughter's school. Emma introduced her father, then slid into the back seat of the SUV. As they pulled away from the curb, she stared out the window, her mind working furiously. Something about this situation still didn't make sense. How had Zain known about her father's business associates, and why would they target someone as powerful and well-protected as Zain Nassar? The drive to the estate passed in tense silence, Richard growing increasingly nervous as they approached the imposing security gates. Emma, by contrast, felt an odd sense of calm descending. For the first time in weeks, the path forward seemed clear. Her daughters needed protection, and Zain, whatever his motives might be, had the resources to provide it. As they pulled up to the main entrance, Emma saw Zain waiting on the steps, his expression grim. He helped her from the car, his hand lingering on hers slightly longer than necessary. The security team has your daughters, he informed her quietly. They're on their way here now. Thank you, Emma said, her gratitude genuine despite her confusion about his involvement. Zain's eyes shifted to Richard, who was emerging from the SUV with considerably less grace. Mr. Reynolds, I believe we have matters to discuss. Richard looked like he might bolt, but Marcus's steady presence behind him eliminated that option. Zain led them into his study, a room Emma had seen only once before, a masculine space of leather and dark wood that served as the heart of his business, operations at home. Sit, Zain instructed Richard, gesturing to a chair in front of his desk. To Emma, he said more gently, the girls will be brought to the East Wing guest suite. Mrs. Chen is preparing it for them now. I should be there when they arrive, Emma said, torn between staying for this conversation and greeting her daughters. Of course, Zain agreed. But first, there are things you need to know. He turned to Richard, his expression hardening. Mr. Reynolds, I believe it's time you told your daughter the full truth about your involvement with the Corellis. Richard blanched. How do you know that name? The Corellis, Emma repeated, looking between the two men in confusion. Vincent Corelli, Zain explained, his eyes never leaving Richard, heads a network of businesses that straddle the line between legitimate and criminal. Money laundering, loan sharking, some high-end theft. They're careful, sophisticated. Unlike the stereotypical gangsters of movie fame, they've been trying to gain access to my financial systems for some time. He turned to Emma. 3 months ago, my security team identified your father as a potential point of compromise. He had been contracted to do some accounting work for one of their shell companies. You knew, Emma whispered, the pieces suddenly falling into place. You knew who I was when you bid on me at the auction? Yes, Zain admitted without apology. When your profile appeared in the auction listings, I recognized your name from the security reports. I saw an opportunity to understand what the Corellis were planning. The revelation struck Emma like a physical blow. All this time she had been nothing more than a means to gather intelligence on her father's employers. Not even her perceived value at the auction had been real, just another calculated move in Zain's ongoing chess match with the Corellis. So this entire arrangement was just... what? A way to keep tabs on my father? To use me to get to him? Her voice remained steady despite the turmoil inside her. Initially, yes, Zain acknowledged, his expression unreadable, but it evolved into something more complex. Richard shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Emma, I didn't know Nassar was involved when I suggested the auction. I swear. You didn't know because the Corellis didn't tell you, Zain cut in sharply. They used you, just as they intended to use Emma to get to me. They manipulated your gambling debts to create pressure points they could exploit. Emma felt as though she were watching a play unfold, one where she had unknowingly been cast in a central role. So the debt was real, but the collection methods were part of their plan to get to you, through me. Precisely, Zain confirmed. Though I suspect your father's debt wasn't quite as large as the Corellis claimed. Their goal was to force you into a vulnerable position, hoping you'd end up with someone they could manipulate or bribe for information about me. Instead, I ended up with you, Emma said flatly. Quite a coincidence. Not coincidence, strategy. Zain's dark eyes held hers. Once I saw your profile and made the connection to your father, I ensured no one else would win that auction. The sound of car doors closing outside caught their attention. Emma moved to the window, her heart leaping at the sight of Sophie and Lily being helped from an SUV, their small backpacks clutched in their hands. Go to them, Zain said softly. We'll continue this discussion later. Emma didn't need to be told twice. She hurried from the study, nearly running through the marble hallways until she reached the front entrance. As the doors opened and her daughters appeared, looking small and confused in the grand foyer, Emma felt tears spring to her eyes. Mommy, they cried in unison, rushing toward her. She knelt, gathering them both in her arms, holding them so tightly they squirmed in protest. My babies, she whispered against their hair. I've missed you so much. Is this your new job? Sophie asked, gazing around at the opulent surroundings with wide eyes. Sort of, Emma replied, searching for an explanation that wouldn't frighten them. This is where I've been staying while I work, and now you and Grandpa are going to stay here. Too, just for a little while. Like a vacation? Lily asked hopefully. Exactly like a vacation, Emma agreed, forcing cheer into her voice. With a swimming pool and everything. As Mrs. Chen appeared to show them to their suite, Emma turned to find Zain watching from the corridor that led to his study. His expression as he observed her reunion with her daughters was impossible to read. Later, after the twins were settled in their temporary quarters, with a movie playing on a television larger than any they had seen before, Emma returned to Zain's study. Richard was gone, presumably being interviewed in more detail by the security team. They're beautiful, Zain said as she entered. They have your eyes. Thank you, Emma replied, taking a seat across from him, for bringing them here, for keeping them safe. Zain nodded once, acknowledging her gratitude without comment. Now, Emma continued, her voice hardening, I believe you owe me the complete truth, all of it, Zain. No more strategic omissions. He studied her for a long moment, as if weighing how much to reveal. Then, with a slight nod, he began to speak. Catherine Williams, my former fiancée, was not just unfaithful, she was working for the Corellis. He rose, moving to the window that overlooked the desert landscape. Her affair with my driver was real, but it was also cover for passing information about my business dealings, my security protocols, my vulnerabilities. Emma listened in stunned silence as Zane continued, his voice distant, as if recounting someone else's story. When I discovered the affair, I also found evidence of her duplicity. Rather than confronting her directly, I allowed her to believe I was merely a wounded lover. Meanwhile, I systematically dismantled her operation, cutting off her access to my systems, feeding her misinformation that the Corellis acted on to their detriment. He turned back to face Emma. Michael, the driver, disappeared before I could determine his level of involvement. The Corellis extracted him, presumably. Catherine was humiliated socially and professionally, but legally untouchable without revealing my own countermeasures. And now they're trying again, Emma said, putting the pieces together. Using my father, using me. Yes, but they've miscalculated this time. For the first time since she'd known him, Zane's controlled demeanor gave way to something fiercer, more primal. They've threatened what's mine. The possessive statement should have angered Emma, but instead she felt an unexpected flutter in her chest. I'm not yours, Zane, she reminded him softly. This is an arrangement, remember? Temporary, transactional. He moved toward her then, closing the distance between them with deliberate steps. Is that still all it is to you, Emma? The question hung in the air between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Emma found herself unable to maintain the lie that had become increasingly difficult to sustain. No, she admitted finally. It's not. But that doesn't change the fact that we entered into this under false pretenses. You knew who I was. You knew about my father. You bid on me for strategic reasons, not because you saw something valuable in me as a person. That was true at first, Zane acknowledged, his voice low and intense. But it hasn't been true for weeks now, you must know that. He reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek with unexpected tenderness. I didn't anticipate you, Emma Reynolds. Your strength, your intelligence, your unwavering devotion to your daughters. You were supposed to be a means to an end. Instead, you've become. He paused, seeming to search for the right words. What? Emma whispered. What have I become to you? Essential, he replied simply. Against all logic and self-preservation, you've become essential to me. The confession hung between them, transforming the air in the room. Emma felt herself drawn toward him, years of protective walls crumbling in the face of his unexpected vulnerability. But before she could respond, the study door opened and Marcus appeared, his expression grave. Sir, we have a situation, he announced. Mr. Reynolds has gone missing. What do you mean missing? Emma demanded, rising from her chair as Marcus informed them that Richard had escaped through a bathroom window. Zane immediately activated security protocols, while Emma realized her father's intentions. He's going to the Corellis. He thinks he can fix this himself. More likely they contacted him, Zane countered grimly, assuring Emma that her daughters remained safe in the estate. After confirming that Richard's phone was tracked to the Oasis, a luxury hotel owned by Vincent Corelli, Emma insisted on accompanying Zane despite his concerns for her safety. He's my father. Despite everything, I can't abandon him. 20. Minutes later, they arrived at the Oasis and were escorted to a penthouse suite, where Vincent Corelli stood with Catherine Williams, Richard seated nervously on a leather sofa. Dad, Emma called, but Zane held her back. Mr. Nassar, Corelli greeted with a cold smile. How kind of you to join us. And Ms. Reynolds, the final piece of our puzzle. The tension was palpable as Zane confronted Corelli about using Catherine to spy on him and threatening Emma's family. Catherine defended herself weakly, claiming Zane had ruined her reputation. Corelli revealed their leverage. Richard had provided information about Zane's domestic arrangements, and they now expected Emma to use her access to obtain Zane's encryption keys, protecting his financial assets. So you want me to betray him in exchange for my family's safety? Emma asked, exchanging a meaningful glance with Zane. Precisely, Corelli confirmed. A simple transaction. Emma considered everyone in the room before delivering her counter-proposal. You leave my family alone permanently. You cease all operations against Zain Nassar, and in return we don't destroy you. Corelli laughed until Zain revealed their trap. Corelli's operations had been under surveillance for months, his political protection was eroding, and evidence of illegal activities was already reaching authorities. Catherine frantically checked her phone, confirming Zain's claim that Meridian Holdings, Corelli's legitimate business front, had plummeted 40% that morning. "You're bluffing," Corelli stammered, his composure cracking. "Test me," Zain challenged softly. "See what happens when you threaten what matters to me." The power dynamic shifted dramatically. Zain outlined his terms. Corelli would withdraw from Phoenix and never contact Emma or her family again. In return, Zain would halt the evidence, flow to authorities. After tense deliberation, Corelli conceded, "You always were 3 moves ahead, Nassar." They left with Richard, who looked completely defeated. Back at the estate, Emma first checked on her daughters before seeking out Zain in his study. "Is it over?" she asked. "Almost," he confirmed. "Corelli will retreat." Zain then revealed the final truth. He hadn't bid on Emma merely because of her father's Corelli connection. "I saw a kindred spirit, Emma, someone who deserved better than life had dealt them." "So the whole arrangement was just for show?" Emma asked. "Partly," Zain admitted. "But the connection between us, that was the one variable I couldn't control. I expected to find an ally. I never expected to find everything." Kneeling before her, he took her hands. "The arrangement we made is over. You're free to leave, but I'm asking you to stay, not as my companion, but because I can no longer imagine my life without you." "Are you proposing to me, Zain Nassar?" Emma asked, tears welling in her eyes. "In my own overcomplicated way," he smiled. "Will you and your daughters make this your home? Not from necessity, but choice?" Emma answered with a kiss that spoke what words couldn't express. "On one condition," she added when they parted. "My father needs real help with his addiction. If we're going to be a family, that includes helping him recover." Zain agreed, promising the best treatment program available. As the desert sunset painted the sky in gold and crimson, Emma marveled at her journey. What began as a desperate sacrifice had transformed into an unexpected second chance at love and family. Her daughter's laughter echoed through the halls of what would now truly be their home, and Emma knew that the auction that had seemed like her lowest point had actually been the beginning of her greatest blessing. Fim de Historia. Dear listeners, we hope Emma and Zain's journey from deception to devotion has touched your hearts. Their story reminds us that sometimes our greatest challenges can lead to unexpected blessings. For more emotionally captivating tales like this one, we've prepared a special playlist of equally compelling stories. Find it by clicking on the left side of your screen. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of emotions, please subscribe to our channel and like this video. Every day we bring you unique stories that explore life's complexities and the transformative power of love. Don't miss our upcoming content, and please share your thoughts in the comments below. We can't wait to hear from you. Chapped.